Welcome back, folks. This is Jimmy.
Hi, everybody.
And today we're going to see, you just finished watching the final of the cane pace, the first race of the Triple Crown of harness racing. So now we have to go to the following week to Delaware, Ohio, the Little Brown Jug.
So before we do that, Larry, before you play that Little Brown Jug, I want everybody to remember to please, if you do like what you see, hit like, subscribe, share, make comments, and tell your friends. And go ahead, Larry.
And also keep them cards and letters coming in. Send me some questions. Fills in a lot of gaps. So we ship up there and we do the whole bit. Aaron does the whole bit. He gets a watchman to sit in front of the stall all night, and he does all of that stuff. And my concern, and we talked about it the day before, was that Benny Webster, who is another very good friend of mine, we traveled in a lot of the same circles and we did a lot of the things. Benny was a real good guy. I think there was three of us that did these crazy, stupid things. And there was me, Mike Gagliardi, and Benny Webster. Benny Webster, if he met a girl and he liked her, he'd buy her a house. I mean, that's Benny.
That's all?
No, cars and everything else. And that was Benny. That was Mike, too. I said, Benny's not happy with Jimmy. And he feels that that Jimmy did pinch him a little going into that first turn in the final in the cane pace. And he's not happy. And neither is Skip Lewis, who was the trainer of the horse. And he now knows that this horse has to race in front, that if he gets in any kind of trouble where he can't make the top, he's all done. And the horse Benny drives is Seahawk Hanover, who is a bullet out of the gate. And that could be a problem. And we could blow to $3 million because of revenge. And Benny and Skip are mad. Plus, we drew, I think for the final we drew the 2-hole, and Benny drew the rail. And my concern was at that time was Benny would try to take some kind of revenge, because Seahawk could win wire to wire, or he could win off the pace. Wildwood Jeb has to win wire to wire. He can't come off the pace, and Benny knows this. So I don't know what's going to happen. And so Aaron come up with a great idea. He says, why don't we, he says, you know Benny well? I says, I know him very well. He says, why don't you offer him, we'll each put up $100,000. Why don't you offer Benny $300,000 just to let you go before the quarter pole? In other words, go take the lead and Jimmy just sit outside, but before the quarter pole, give you the lead. And then if you can beat him after that, beat him. We're not telling you to stiff your horse, nothing like that. Just let him go. Because if you don't, and this is the argument I could make, because if you don't, we're going to go head to head and you're going to lose. You're going to get beat and I'm going to get beat. So here's $300,000 and let him go by the quarter pole. So that was the plan. So, and naturally, it was always contingent on post positions and everything else.
There's a lot of contingencies, sure.
Well, the main contingency was that who drew inside of who. But it turned out that, but we had it planned where if it turned out the way we were talking, that Benny drew inside of us, Benny would just rush out of there like he tried to do at the final in the cane pace, and then just and he could still win like that by parking anyway. So now we're at the jug. and we have all the plans set up for any different situation. And now it's getting to be post time, and there's no Jimmy Marohn. So the paddock judge calls me and he says, "You're gonna have to name a driver. Jimmy didn't show up yet." So I says, "Well, I'll drive him myself." So now we're scoring down, and the marshal calls the paces. We turn to get behind the gate, and then all of a sudden the starter says, "Turn your horses." We turn the horses, and the paddock judge said, for me to go back to the paddock. Jimmy just showed up. So they allowed him to drive without getting a license and everything else. He threw his colors on real quick, and that was that. And he drove the horse in the first elimination. Now what happens is that he drives the horse, and coming down the stretch, he's in front. Coming down the stretch, a horse was coming up on him. Now, Jimmy was supposed to be here, and because I never asked him about this until right up to today, and I was planning on asking him this at the at this podcast, but for some reason he couldn't make it. He was scheduled to come, and something happened. I guess it was a family thing, and he couldn't make it. But here's what happened, and I'm sure that if Jimmy was here, he would attest to this. Coming down the stretch in the first elimination, he was in front, and maybe 10 feet from the wire, a horse come charging at him, and Jimmy hit him with the whip. Something that I told him you can't hit this horse with a whip. But anyway, he hit him with a whip, and the horse just went sideways a little bit, curled up a little bit, and got beat. But he finished second. And he comes back to the paddock, and the horse is gushing blood. Now, I'll say this in layman's terms so everybody can understand it. On a horse, in the back leg, there's a big, thick vein that runs down the inside of the back leg. And it's probably the size of a dime, and it protrudes. You could see it. Well, when Jimmy hit the horse, the snapper, the little thing at the end of the whip, it hit that, and it sliced it open.
Wow.
So now the horse comes back to the paddock, and he made the final. He finished second. He made the final. And I never had a chance to talk to Jimmy because the horse was gushing blood. So now we bring the horse back to the paddock area, which is right there in front of everybody. It's like a fair. And I asked the groom to run to these concession stands to get ice because I couldn't stop the blood. Now, just picture this, a gigantic horse that just finished the race, a real hot-blooded thing, and he's all wound up and bleeding like crazy, and I'm trying to stop the blood on the back leg, and he's kicking and kicking and kicking.
Wow.
I send the groom to try to get ice. Not one stand, soda stand, nobody would give him ice because it was like very hot out, and they all needed the ice for their business. I couldn't get ice. I'm doing everything I can to try to stop the blood because the final is in another 45 minutes, an hour away. And he's bleeding, and I don't know what to do. I mean, he's trying to kick me, and I can't. There's no bandage that would stay. The horse is soaking wet. Anyway, I just kept soaking it with cold water and everything else. And they draw for post positions for the final. And sure enough, one of the scenarios that we were talking about happens. Seahawk Hanover and Benny Webster draw the rail, and I draw the 2-hole. Now, this is the worst thing that could happen because Benny can leave out of there like a bullet, and he could win that way, and my horse can't. And there's a revenge factor, and Benny hates Jimmy. Skip Lewis, who trained the horse, hates Jimmy. Anyway, I get a hold of the vet. We get some, I forget what you call them, to try to stop the bleeding and try to clot it and everything else. I forget them sticks that they have. I forget the name of them. and we tried to cauterize it, and we were successful a little bit. It was just dripping. But anyway, he goes into the race. So now, because of all of this happening, I do that until the last second. I have them cauterizing sticks on them till the last second, and then Jimmy hops on and he goes. Now they're going into the first turn, and now we're going to watch what happens. So here it is. Here's the race. The race that means $3 million. $1 million to me, because after the Kane Pace win, well, it was really after I won with him in Scioto, he gave me and Davey a third each of the, so we each owned a third. So out of that $3 million, I was going to get $1 million. All he had to do was win the final. And here's the race. We'll watch it together.
The early leader was Wildwood Jeb and James Marohn, with Seahawk Hanover and Ben Webster second at the 8th, when they started another chain reaction accident, taking 4 horses out of the race.
Okay, you saw what happened. It was a catastrophe. Because I never got a chance to see Benny Webster, so I couldn't make him that deal. I couldn't make the offer. It was terrible. It was terrible for everybody involved. Aside from the fact that we just blew $3 million, that was the least of it. Wildwood Jeb wound up snapping his leg, getting caught in the frame of the bike. Benny Webster, when he got up off the ground, Jimmy Marohn was still on the ground. He went over to him and started just pounding on him. And it happened right at the paddock entrance, right at the 8th pole. And I ran out and I had to pull Benny off him. And it was terrible. It was terrible. Then we had to untangle the horses, and because the rest of the field just kept going around, so we had probably less than a minute to untangle everything, get them out of the way, which we did, including breaking up the fight between Benny and Jimmy. It wasn't even a fight. Benny was just pounding on him, and that was the end of that. It was a terrible scene. We had to make a decision what to do with Wildwood Jeb. His leg was caught in the frame of the bike, and we couldn't tell if it was snapped in half or it was just terrible. We wind up taking X-rays, and it was something that the vet thought that we could save, and we did. We wind up saving horse, and but that was the end of the ride. It was a great ride, and it was bad. And who knows, had Jimmy not hit that horse and that vein not open up, I would have gone to Benny and offered him the $300,000 to let the horse go, and none of this would have happened. Now, I don't know if Benny would have taken it, but I don't see why he wouldn't have, because if the conditions were reversed, I think I would have taken it, because he's not asking me not to beat him. He's just saying something that makes sense, that's logical. If you want to fight, both of us will battle it out, and we'll both finish up the racetrack. So I don't know how we would handle it, because he was very mad at Jimmy because of the last race at the Kane Pace, when he says that Jimmy pinched him in the first turn. That's why he made the break. So I don't know. I don't know what would have happened, but what happened, and that was the end of a great ride.
And a great bonus that you would have had too.
Well, yeah, but the money is like the least of it. I was doing pretty good then. It was an 81 from 78 when I got resurrected. because of Stanley Dancer and Slutsky and Houghton. They all helped me. They just gave me a new life, and I needed them guys because they were they were the most respected guys in all of harness racing, and they got me to where I wanted to go. And by '81, when this happened, I was already well on my way. I was in good shape, and so the money part, the $1 million, it was $1 million, but it was losing the horse because he basically retired after that, and that was it. That was the worst part of it. But that was just another, one of the things that happen in racing. I'm not the only one that these things happen to, but it was just like everything else I do. I wind up making history without even in this particular, with this particular horse. I was the first one ever to supplement a horse that into the cane pace that won. I was the first one that ever supplemented, that ever had a free-legged pacer. I was the only one that ever caused an accident like that in the jug. Like everything I do becomes spectacular.
Becomes record breaking.
Yeah, it's some of it is good and some of it is bad, but the highs and lows are things I'm used to, and I was just grateful that it happened. I felt terrible for Aaron, because in reality what we were left with was not much, and life goes on, and I'll continue this whole saga next week. It starts to get interesting, and it starts to get hairy. But we'll continue next week. I'm gonna try to have a special guest on. This girl, Kelly Jones, she was with me with the Thoroughbreds. I got a call from her father when I was with the Thoroughbreds. I was with Mike McCarthy at Gulfstream Park. I had about maybe 7, 8 horses. He had maybe 10. And I got a call from a guy called Buddy Jones. He says, my daughter, she's 19 years old, and she really loves horses, and the most she could do here is learn how to clean stalls and ride.
Well, that's how they start you off, correct?
Yeah, but she was doing it for years, and it was time that her father thought that she should get to the next level. And I don't know how he got my name and number, but he got it, and I said, sure, I'll take care of her. And he says, I'm sending you my daughter, and I know you'll be responsible and everything. And I said, yeah. I says, I'll take care of her like she's my own daughter. And sure enough, the day she was supposed to arrive was that afternoon. I was sitting outside the barn, and all of a sudden, I think it was a Mustang convertible pulled up, and steps out a beautiful, beautiful girl. Oh, God. And I says to myself, I sure hope this is not Kelly Jones. But it was.
And it was.
And it was the beginning of an unbelievable friendship. She was like a sponge. She wanted to learn everything.
Well, all aspects.
And I think she's gonna fly down here next week. But just let me say this before we close. She got run over about 1.5 years ago by a truck. They run over her body and her head. She was in a coma for over 1 year.
My God.
She snapped out. She come out of it. It was a miracle. Nobody thought she'd make it, but she made it. And our friendship is so solid that after we spoke, she finally, I sent word to her that as soon as she opened her eyes, she would hear it, that if she ever needed me for anything. And finally she texted me back, and it was a good conversation. And she says, I says, I would love to have you on the show and talk about our experiences before your accident and we'll talk about a little bit what happened to you. And she was agreeable, and I'm going to try to get her up here maybe for the next podcast. So we'll skip ahead a couple of years just to have her on, and because she's going to take time away from her therapy and everything, and I'm going to try to get her here for the next episode. So it'll be a good one. I'm sorry to the folks out there that want to hear about the mob stuff. I can get to that. In fact, my friend Jimmy here, maybe one of these next podcasts, he can tell his story, which will bring us right back into the whole mob genre. And he has quite a story. He wasn't a New York guy; he was a New Jersey guy, but he was right up there at the top. And he could bring that back to the people that like all that mob stuff. But like I said, any questions pertaining to mob, my association with them, with the horses, I'm getting
sure
on.
You're right. Like and subscribe. Also, your comments too for Larry. Any questions?
Yeah, just keep the questions coming in. Anyway, I'll see you next week.
Good night, everybody.